The morning it all began, I was standing in my kitchen with flour dusting my hands and the sweet smell of vanilla extract hanging in the air. The sunlight came through the window above the sink, warm on my face, and I remember thinking how perfect everything felt. The mixer hummed its steady rhythm as I creamed butter and sugar together for chocolate chip cookies, the kind my husband Daniel loved since he was a boy. I had no idea that across town, in a coffee shop with creaking wooden floors and the bitter scent of dark roast filling every corner, my mother-in-law Patricia was planting the first seeds of a lie that would nearly destroy my life. I met Daniel 5 years before all of this happened, at a community fundraiser for the local animal shelter. He had kind eyes, the color of warm honey, and when he smiled at me while holding a squirming golden retriever puppy, I felt something shift in my chest. We married 2 years later in a small ceremony at the old church on Maple Street, the one with stained glass windows that threw colored light across the worn pews. Patricia had seemed pleasant enough back then, though I noticed how her smile never quite reached her eyes when she looked at me, how her hugs felt stiff and obligatory, her perfume always too strong and floral, making my nose itch. The town we lived in was small, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, where gossip spread faster than wildfire through dry grass. Main Street had one grocery store, 2 churches, a diner with red vinyl booths that had been there since the 1950s, and a coffee shop called Brenda's Brew where the women of the town gathered every morning. Patricia was a fixture at Brenda's Brew, always sitting at the corner table near the window, her silver hair perfectly styled, her nails painted a shade of pink that reminded me of cotton candy. She held court there like a queen, and the other women listened to every word that came out of her mouth as if she were delivering gospel truth. I should have paid more attention to the way Patricia looked at me during family dinners, the way her lips would press into a thin line when Daniel reached for my hand across the table. I should have noticed how she always found small ways to criticize me, comments wrapped in sugar but with poison underneath. "Your hair looks interesting today," she would say, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Did you mean to cook the roast that way? My Daniel usually likes it more tender. Are you feeling well? You look a bit tired." Each comment was a tiny cut, small enough to ignore in the moment, but they added up over time, leaving me feeling raw and inadequate. The trouble started on a Tuesday in late September. The air had turned crisp, carrying the smell of wood smoke and dying leaves. I had stopped by the grocery store to pick up ingredients for dinner, pushing my cart down the narrow aisles with their flickering fluorescent lights. Mrs. Henderson, who lived 3 houses down from us, was standing by the canned goods. She had always been friendly, always stopping to chat about her garden or her grandchildren. But that day, when I smiled and said hello, she looked at me with something cold in her eyes. She turned away without a word, her cart wheels squeaking as she hurried toward the checkout. I stood there confused, my hand still raised in greeting, feeling foolish. The store suddenly felt too cold, the air conditioning raising goosebumps on my arms. I told myself she must not have seen me, must have been distracted, but something in my stomach twisted with unease. The next day, I went to the post office to mail a package to my sister in California. The woman behind the counter, Janet, had always been chatty, always asking about Daniel and telling me stories about her cats. But when I walked in, the little bell above the door chiming, she barely looked at me. Her face was stiff, her mouth set in a hard line. She weighed my package in silence, the old scale creaking, and told me the price in a flat voice. When I tried to make conversation, asking about her cats, she just shrugged and turned away, busying herself with papers that rustled loudly in the quiet space. I walked out into the bright afternoon sunshine feeling like I had stepped into some alternate reality where I had done something terrible, but no one would tell me what it was. The sidewalk was hot under my feet, heat radiating up through my shoes. My heart was beating faster than it should have been, a nervous flutter in my chest that I could not explain. That evening, Daniel came home from work at the hardware store he managed, smelling like sawdust and motor oil. I was setting the table, the plates clinking against the wooden surface, when I told him about the strange encounters. He kissed my forehead, his lips warm and reassuring, and said I was probably imagining things. "People have bad days," he said. "Do not read too much into it." His voice was gentle, but I could hear the dismissal in it, the way he was not really listening. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think I was being paranoid, seeing problems where there were none. But the next day, it happened again. And the day after that. Everywhere I went, people who had been friendly for years suddenly treated me like I was invisible, or worse, like I was something unpleasant they wanted to avoid. At the library, where I volunteered twice a week, the head librarian told me they no longer needed my help, her eyes not meeting mine, her fingers fidgeting with a pen. At the farmer's market on Saturday morning, vendors who usually greeted me with warm smiles and free samples turned away when I approached their stalls. The air smelled like fresh bread and ripe tomatoes, but I could not enjoy any of it. I felt like I was walking through a nightmare, everything familiar but wrong, twisted into something I did not recognize. Daniel still did not believe me. He said I was being too sensitive, that I was looking for problems. We had our first real fight about it on a Sunday night. The house was dark except for the lamp in the living room, casting long shadows across the walls. I could hear the clock ticking in the kitchen, each second loud in the tense silence between us. "You are being paranoid," he said, his voice rising with frustration. "These people have known you for years. Why would they suddenly turn on you?" I tried to explain that I did not know why, that was the whole problem, but he just shook his head. His jaw was tight, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Maybe you did something to offend them," he said, and those words hit me like a slap. I felt tears burning in my eyes, my throat closing up. I had not done anything. I knew I had not done anything. But doubt crept in anyway, cold and insidious. What if I had somehow offended everyone without realizing it? What if there was something wrong with me that I could not see? I barely slept that night. I lay in bed listening to Daniel's steady breathing beside me, feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my life. The sheets were tangled around my legs, too hot and then too cold. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the faces of my neighbors, cold and distant, turning away from me. The truth came out 2 weeks later, on a gray October afternoon when the sky was heavy with clouds that threatened rain. I had gone to the grocery store again, steeling myself for more cold shoulders and averted eyes. I was in the produce section, the air cool and smelling like earth and green things, when I heard voices from the next aisle over. I recognized them immediately. Patricia's voice, sharp and clear, and Mrs. Henderson responding in shocked tones. "I know it is hard to believe," Patricia was saying, "but I saw the bruises myself. On Daniel's arms. He tries to hide them, but a mother knows. A mother sees." My blood went cold. I stood frozen, my hand still reaching for a bag of apples, unable to move or breathe. "She is violent," Patricia continued, her voice dropping to a stage whisper that somehow carried perfectly through the store. "He is afraid of her. He will not leave because he loves her, but I am terrified for my son. I have begged him to go to the police, but he is too ashamed. Mrs. Henderson made a sympathetic noise, a soft clucking of her tongue. That poor boy, she said. And she seemed so normal on the outside. You just never know what goes on behind closed doors. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. My legs went weak, and I had to grab the edge of the produce display to keep from falling. The metal was cold under my fingers, grounding me in reality even as everything else spun out of control. Patricia was telling people I was abusing Daniel. That was why everyone had turned against me. That was why I had become a pariah in my own town. I do not remember leaving the store. I do not remember getting into my car or driving home. The next thing I knew, I was sitting in my driveway, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. The house looked the same as always, white siding and blue shutters, the maple tree in the front yard dropping red and gold leaves onto the lawn. But nothing felt the same. Nothing would ever be the same again. When Daniel came home that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table in the dark. I had not turned on any lights. I had not made dinner. I had just sat there as the sun set and shadows filled the room, trying to process what I had heard, trying to figure out what to do. He flipped on the light switch, and the sudden brightness made me squint. His face shifted from confusion to concern when he saw me. "What is wrong?" he asked, setting down his keys. They clattered against the counter, too loud in the quiet house. I told him everything. I told him about the conversation I had overheard, about his mother's lies, about the rumors she had been spreading. With each word, I watched his face change. First disbelief, then anger, then something that looked almost like grief. He sank into the chair across from me, his head in his hands. "She would not do that," he said, but his voice was weak, uncertain. "She is my mother. Why would she do that?" I reached across the table and took his hand. It was cold, his fingers limp in mine. "I do not know," I said. "But we have to stop this. We have to tell people the truth." But it was not that simple. In a small town, once a rumor takes root, it is almost impossible to dig it out. The next day, Daniel went to see his mother. I wanted to go with him, but he said it would be better if he talked to her alone. He was gone for 2 hours. When he came back, his face was pale, his eyes red. "She denied everything," he said, his voice hollow. "She said she never told anyone I was being abused. She said you must have misheard, that you are trying to turn me against her. She cried, said she could not believe I would accuse her of something so horrible." I felt something break inside me. The woman had looked him in the eye, her own son, and lied. And part of him, I could see it in his face, part of him wanted to believe her. "She is your mother," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I know what I heard. I am not lying to you. I am not trying to turn you against her. She is doing this to me, and I do not know why." He nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes, the war going on inside him. "How do you choose between your wife and your mother? How do you accept that the woman who raised you is capable of such cruelty?" We decided to confront the rumors head-on. Daniel went to Brenda's Brew the next morning, walking into that coffee shop with its creaking floors and the smell of burnt coffee that never quite went away. He stood in the middle of the room and told everyone there that the rumors about me were false, that I had never hurt him, that he did not know where these lies had started, but they needed to stop. I waited at home, pacing the living room, my footsteps muffled by the carpet, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. When he came back, he looked defeated. "They did not believe me," he said, slumping onto the couch. They smiled and nodded, but I could see it in their eyes. They think I am covering for you. They think I am a victim in denial. He put his face in his hands, and I saw his shoulders shake. I sat beside him and wrapped my arms around him, feeling his body tremble against mine. We stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the quiet house while outside the world we knew crumbled away. The harassment started after that. Someone spray-painted the word abuser on our garage door in bright red letters that dripped like blood. The paint smell was sharp and chemical, making my eyes water. Daniel spent a whole Saturday scrubbing it off, his arms aching, his hands raw from the harsh cleaner. But the ghost of those letters remained, a faint shadow on the white paint that we could still see if we looked closely enough. Our mailbox was knocked over 3 times in 1 week, the metal post bent and twisted. We would hear it in the night, the crash and clang of metal hitting pavement, and we would lie in bed, neither of us moving, neither of us wanting to look outside and see who had done it. Someone slashed my tires while my car was parked outside the grocery store in broad daylight. I came out with my bags of groceries, the plastic handles cutting into my fingers, and found all 4 tires flat, rubber split open in clean cuts. No one had seen anything, of course. No one ever saw anything. The police took a report, the officer's pen scratching across the paper, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes. He had heard the rumors too. Maybe he even believed them. I stopped going out unless I absolutely had to. The house became my prison, the walls closing in a little more each day. I would stand at the window and watch the neighbors walk by, their dogs pulling on leashes, their children riding bikes, and I felt like I was watching life happen from behind glass, separate and untouchable. Daniel tried to be supportive, but I could feel the strain between us growing. He was caught in the middle, torn between believing me and the cognitive dissonance of accepting that his mother was a liar. Some days he would hold me and tell me we would get through this together. Other days he would be distant, quiet, and I would catch him looking at me with something that might have been doubt. The worst part was not knowing why. That question haunted me day and night. Why was Patricia doing this? What had I done to make her hate me so much? I replayed every interaction we had ever had, searching for the moment I had offended her, the thing I had said or done that had triggered this vendetta. But I could not find it. I had always been polite, always tried to be a good daughter-in-law. I had bitten my tongue through countless passive-aggressive comments, had smiled through family dinners where she criticized everything from my cooking to my clothes to my career. Then one night in early November, when the first frost had turned the grass white and brittle, Daniel's sister called. Her name was Rebecca, and she lived 2 states away. She and I had always gotten along well, talking on the phone every few weeks, exchanging recipes and book recommendations. But we had not spoken since the rumors started. When I saw her name on the caller ID, my stomach clenched with anxiety. Daniel answered, putting the phone on speaker. His hand was shaking slightly as he set it on the kitchen table between us. Rebecca's voice came through, tight with emotion. I need to tell you something, she said. I should have told you weeks ago, but I was scared. Mom made me promise not to say anything, but I cannot keep quiet anymore. This is wrong. What she is doing is wrong. Daniel and I looked at each other across the table. The refrigerator hummed in the background, a steady drone that seemed too loud in the sudden silence. Rebecca took a deep breath, and I could hear it crackle through the phone speaker. Mom is lying, she said. About everything. She has been spreading those rumors about your wife on purpose. I heard her planning it. I was visiting in September, remember? The weekend before all this started. I heard her on the phone with Mrs. Henderson, telling her that she was worried about you, that she had seen bruises, that she thought your wife was hurting you. But Daniel, you were not even there that weekend. You were at that hardware convention in Chicago. There were no bruises. There was nothing. She made it all up. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white. Daniel's face had gone completely pale, his mouth open but no sound coming out. "Why?" he finally managed to say, his voice barely a whisper. "Why would she do that?" Rebecca was quiet for a moment, and I could hear her crying softly, little hitching breaths that made my own throat tighten with emotion. "Because she does not want to share you," Rebecca said. "She has always been like this, Daniel. You just never saw it because you were her golden child, her baby boy. But do you remember when I got engaged? How she told everyone that my fiancé was cheating on me, how she almost ruined my wedding. You thought she was just being protective, but she was lying then too. She could not stand that I was leaving, that I was choosing someone else over her. And when I moved away anyway, she barely spoke to me for a year." I remembered the wedding. I had not been dating Daniel yet, but he had told me about it later, about how his mother had been convinced Rebecca's fiancé was unfaithful, how there had been drama and tears and accusations that turned out to be baseless. He had framed it as a misunderstanding, his mother being overprotective and getting bad information. But now, hearing Rebecca's voice crack with old pain, I understood it had been something much darker. "She is doing the same thing to your wife," Rebecca continued. "She cannot stand that you love someone else, that you have built a life that does not revolve around her. So she is trying to destroy it. She wants to drive your wife away, wants to make you so miserable that you will leave her and come back home, back to Mom, where she can have you all to herself. It is sick, Daniel. It is controlling and manipulative and sick, and I am so sorry I did not say something sooner. I was afraid she would cut me off completely, that I would lose my brother too. But I cannot let her do this to an innocent person." Daniel stood up so fast his chair fell over backward, clattering against the tile floor. He walked out of the kitchen, and I heard the front door slam, the sound echoing through the house. Through the window, I could see him standing in the front yard, his breath making white clouds in the cold night air. I picked up the phone, taking it off speaker and holding it to my ear. "Thank you," I said to Rebecca, my voice shaking. "Thank you for telling us." She was crying harder now, her words coming in gasps. "I am so sorry," she said. "I am so sorry for what she has put you through. I should have been braver. I should have spoken up right away. I told her it was okay, that I understood, but inside I was reeling. All of this, all the pain and isolation and fear, had been because of one woman's twisted need to control her son. It was almost too much to comprehend." I went outside to Daniel. The grass crunched under my feet, frozen and stiff. He was standing with his arms wrapped around himself, staring up at the dark sky. The stars were bright and cold, distant points of light that offered no comfort. I stood beside him, not touching, just being there. After a long time, he spoke. "I did not want to believe it," he said. "Even after everything, part of me kept thinking there had to be some explanation, some misunderstanding. But Rebecca would not lie about this. She has no reason to lie." His voice broke, and I saw tears on his cheeks, silver in the moonlight. "My own mother tried to destroy my marriage. She tried to destroy you. How do I come back from that?" How do I ever look at her again? I took his hand, lacing my fingers through his. They were ice cold, and I squeezed tight, trying to warm them. We figure it out together, I said. One step at a time. He turned to me then, and pulled me into his arms, holding me so tight I could barely breathe. I could feel him shaking, could feel the wetness of his tears against my neck. I am so sorry, he whispered. I am so sorry I doubted you. I am so sorry I did not protect you from this. I held him and let him cry, let him grieve for the mother he thought he had, for the illusion that had been shattered. The next morning, Daniel called his mother and told her he knew the truth. I could hear Patricia's voice through the phone, high and defensive, but I could not make out the words. Daniel's face was hard, his jaw set. I do not want to hear it, he said, cutting her off. Rebecca told us everything. I know you have been lying. I know you made all of this up to try to break us apart. His mother's voice rose higher, more frantic. Daniel closed his eyes, and I saw pain flash across his face. No, he said firmly. I do not care what your reasons are. There is no excuse for what you have done. You have hurt my wife. You have hurt me. You have damaged our reputation in this town, maybe beyond repair. And for what? Because you could not handle me being happy with someone else? There was a long pause. I could hear Patricia crying, loud dramatic sobs that sounded almost theatrical. Daniel's expression did not change. You need help, Mom, he said quietly. Professional help. But I cannot be around you right now. Do not call me. Do not come to our house. When I am ready to talk to you again, I will let you know. He hung up before she could respond, setting the phone down on the counter with a soft click. His hand was steady now, his face calm, but I could see the cost of that conversation in his eyes. Now came the hard part, trying to undo the damage Patricia had done. We started by talking to Rebecca, asking her if she would be willing to come to town and tell people what she had told us. She agreed immediately, booking a flight for the following weekend. In the meantime, Daniel went back to Brenda's brew. This time, he did not just make a general statement. He told them about Rebecca's phone call, about his mother's history of manipulation, about the fact that there had never been any bruises, any violence, any truth to the rumors at all. Some people believed him. I could see it in their faces when they came to our door over the next few days, shame and apology written in every line. Mrs. Henderson came with a homemade apple pie, the crust golden and flaky, the smell of cinnamon and sugar wafting from the dish. She stood on our porch with tears in her eyes, saying she was so sorry, that she should have talked to us directly instead of believing gossip. Janet from the post office brought flowers, bright yellow chrysanthemums that she said reminded her of sunshine. She hugged me tight, her arms strong around my shoulders, and whispered that she felt terrible for how she had treated me. But others were not so quick to change their minds. Some people had invested too much in believing the lie. To admit they had been wrong would mean admitting they had participated in harassing an innocent person, and that was too uncomfortable a truth to face. They avoided us instead, crossing the street when they saw us coming, finding excuses to leave rooms we entered. The town remained divided, some people welcoming us back into the fold, others keeping their distance, their faces closed and suspicious. Rebecca arrived on a cold Saturday morning, the sky gray and threatening snow. She looked like Daniel, the same honey-colored eyes, the same shape to her face. But where Daniel was gentle and soft-spoken, Rebecca had a steel core that showed in the set of her shoulders, the firm line of her mouth. She hugged me first, before even greeting her brother, holding me tight and saying she was sorry over and over until I had to tell her to stop, that it was not her fault, that she had done the right thing in the end. She went with Daniel to Brenda's brew that afternoon. I stayed home, not ready to face that room full of people who had believed the worst about me. Daniel told me later what happened. Rebecca had stood in the middle of the coffee shop, in the same spot where Daniel had stood weeks before, and she had told them everything. She told them about their mother's pattern of manipulation, about the lies she had told about Rebecca's fiancé, about the phone call she had overheard where Patricia had deliberately planted false information about me. She told them that their mother was not a concerned parent but a controlling woman who could not let her children have lives of their own. The room had been silent when she finished, Daniel said. You could have heard a pin drop. Some people looked ashamed. Some looked angry, though whether they were angry at Patricia or at Rebecca for exposing her, he could not tell. Mrs. Henderson had stood up and said that she owed us more than an apology, that she owed us her public support, and she was going to make sure everyone knew the truth. Several other women had nodded in agreement. But Patricia's closest friends, the ones who sat at her table every morning, had gotten up and walked out, their faces tight with disapproval. The town gossip mill, which had worked so efficiently to destroy my reputation, now worked in reverse. Within days, everyone knew that Patricia had lied, that she had manufactured the abuse allegations out of jealousy and a twisted need for control. Some people were horrified. Others tried to defend her, saying she must have been confused, must have genuinely believed something was wrong. But the evidence was too clear, Rebecca's testimony too damning. Patricia's reign as the queen of Brenda's brew was over. She left town 2 weeks later. Daniel heard it from a former neighbor of hers, a woman who called to say she had seen the moving truck, had watched Patricia load up her belongings and drive away without saying goodbye to anyone. She had moved to Florida, the woman said, to live near her sister. Daniel hung up the phone and sat in silence for a long time. I did not know what to say. How do you comfort someone who has lost their mother, not to death but to the revelation of who she really was? Life slowly returned to something resembling normal, but it was a new normal, different from what we had known before. The people who had apologized became some of our closest friends, as if the shared experience of the crisis had bonded us together. Mrs. Henderson invited us to dinner every Sunday, her dining room warm and filled with the smell of roasted chicken and fresh bread. Janet started a book club and insisted I join, saying she valued my opinions and wanted to make up for lost time. These small kindnesses helped heal some of the wounds, but scars remained. I could not walk down Main Street without remembering the weeks when everyone had looked at me with suspicion and disgust. I could not go into Brenda's brew, even though the owner had apologized profusely and offered us free coffee for life. The smell of that place, the creak of those floors, brought back too many bad memories. Some nights I would wake up in a cold sweat, dreaming that I was back in that time, isolated and afraid, with no one believing me. Daniel would hold me until the shaking stopped, whispering that it was over, that we were safe now. Daniel struggled too, in ways that were harder to see but no less real. He had nightmares about his mother, dreams where she was kind and loving like she had been when he was a child, and he would wake up grieving all over again. He started seeing a therapist, a kind woman with a gentle voice who helped him work through the betrayal and the guilt. Because he felt guilty, even though he had done nothing wrong. He felt guilty for not seeing what his mother was sooner, for doubting me even briefly, for not protecting me better. I told him over and over that it was not his fault, that no one expects their own mother to be capable of such cruelty, but guilt is not rational. It sits in your chest like a stone, heavy and cold, and it does not go away just because someone tells you it should. Rebecca became a more regular presence in our lives. She visited once a month, making the trip even though it was expensive and time-consuming. She and Daniel grew closer than they had been in years, bonded by their shared understanding of what their mother had done, the shared grief for the family they had thought they had. She told us stories about growing up, things Daniel had been too young to remember or had not seen because he was the favorite child. Stories about how Patricia had driven away Rebecca's friends with lies and manipulation, how she had sabotaged Rebecca's first job by calling her boss and saying she was unreliable, how she had tried to control every aspect of Rebecca's life until Rebecca had finally moved far away to escape. Hearing these stories was painful but also validating. It confirmed that what had happened to me was not random, not personal in the sense that I had done something to deserve it. Patricia would have done this to anyone Daniel married, anyone who threatened her control over him. I was just the unlucky person who happened to fall in love with her son. 6 months after Patricia left town, Daniel received a letter from her. It came in a pale blue envelope, his name written in her distinctive handwriting, all loops and flourishes. He stared at it for a long time, turning it over in his hands, before finally opening it. I sat beside him on the couch, close enough to offer support but not reading over his shoulder. His eyes moved across the page, and I watched his expression change from neutral to sad to angry and back to sad again. When he finished, he handed it to me without a word. The letter was 3 pages long, written on matching pale blue stationery. Patricia's words were a masterpiece of manipulation, even an apology. She said she was sorry for any pain she had caused, but she had only been trying to protect her son. She said she had been worried about me, had seen signs that concerned her, and maybe she had overreacted, but it came from a place of love. She said she missed Daniel terribly, that she thought about him every day, that she hoped he could find it in his heart to forgive her. She never once acknowledged that she had lied. She never once took full responsibility for what she had done. It was all couched in language that made her the victim, the concerned mother who had made a mistake out of love. I set the letter down on the coffee table, the paper seeming to carry a weight beyond its physical presence. "Are you going to respond?" I asked. Daniel shook his head slowly. "Not yet," he said. "Maybe not ever. I do not know." She still does not get it. She still thinks this was about her being overprotective, not about her being controlling and manipulative. Until she can actually acknowledge what she did, really acknowledge it without excuses, I do not think I can have her in my life. His voice was steady, but I could see the pain in his eyes, the little boy who still wanted his mother to love him in a healthy way, who still hoped she could change. More letters came over the following months, each one similar to the first. Patricia never quite admitted what she had done, never quite took responsibility. She always framed it as a misunderstanding, as her being too protective, as everyone else overreacting. Daniel stopped opening them after a while. They would arrive in their pale blue envelopes, and he would put them in a drawer unopened, saying maybe someday he would be ready to read them, but not yet. The first anniversary of the day I overheard Patricia in the grocery store came and went. It felt significant somehow, marking a full year since our lives had been turned upside down. We were different people than we had been before. Harder in some ways, more cautious about trusting people, more aware of how quickly a community could turn on you. But we were also stronger. We had survived something that could have destroyed us, and we had survived it together. Daniel surprised me that day by taking me to a new restaurant in the next town over, a place with soft lighting and quiet music, where no one knew us or our story. We sat across from each other at a small table, and he took my hand, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on my palm. "I have been thinking," he said, "about everything that happened. About how close we came to losing each other. And I realized that I never really thanked you." I looked at him, confused. "Thank me for what?" I asked. "For staying," he said simply. "For not giving up on me, even when I doubted you. For not running away from this mess. A lot of people would have left, and I would not have blamed you. But you stayed, and you fought, and you believed in us even when I was not sure I did. I love you for that. I love you for being stronger than I was." I felt tears prick my eyes, hot and sudden. "I stayed because I love you," I said. "Because you are worth fighting for. Because what we have is worth fighting for." He smiled then, a real smile that reached his eyes, and I realized it had been a long time since I had seen him smile like that. "We are going to be okay," he said. "It is going to take time, but we are going to be okay." And I believed him. For the first time in a year, I truly believed that we would be okay. The second year was easier than the first. The town had mostly moved on, finding new gossip to occupy their attention. We had settled into our new normal, our new understanding of the world and our place in it. We had learned who our real friends were, the people who had stood by us or who had apologized and worked to make amends. We had learned to be more careful about who we trusted, but also more appreciative of genuine kindness when we found it. Daniel's relationship with his mother remained fractured. She continued to send letters, and he continued to leave them unopened. Rebecca said Patricia asked about him constantly, wanted to know if he was okay, if he was happy, if he ever talked about her. Rebecca told her the truth, that Daniel was healing but that he was not ready to have contact with her, and might never be ready unless Patricia could truly acknowledge what she had done. Patricia always responded the same way, with tears and protestations that she had already apologized, that she did not know what more she could do. She could not or would not see that an apology without true understanding and accountability was meaningless. I thought about Patricia sometimes, wondered what her life was like in Florida, whether she had found new people to control or whether she was lonely, cut off from both her children and the community where she had once held so much power. Part of me felt sorry for her, for the emptiness that must exist inside someone who could only feel secure by controlling others. But mostly I felt angry. Angry at what she had put us through, angry at the months of fear and isolation, angry at the way she had tried to destroy my marriage and my reputation because she could not stand to share her son's love. I had started painting again, something I had not done since college. I set up an easel in the spare bedroom, the one that got good morning light, and I would spend hours there, losing myself in color and form. I painted abstract pieces mostly, swirls of emotion translated into blues and reds and golds. Daniel said they were beautiful, but I think what he really meant was that he was glad I had found a way to process everything that had happened, a way to take the pain and transform it into something else. We talked about moving away, starting fresh somewhere where no one knew our story. But in the end, we decided to stay. This was our home, and we had fought too hard for our place in it to let Patricia drive us away. Besides, leaving would feel like letting her win, like admitting that she had succeeded in destroying our life here. We refused to give her that satisfaction. On a warm day in late spring, almost 2 years after everything had started, I was working in the garden, my hands deep in the rich dark soil, planting tomatoes and peppers and herbs. The sun was warm on my back, and I could hear birds singing in the trees, a cheerful chorus that made me smile. I heard a car pull into the driveway, the crunch of tires on gravel, and looked up to see Rebecca getting out, her face bright with excitement. She had news, she said, barely able to contain herself. She was pregnant, expecting her first child in the fall. Daniel and I both hugged her, congratulating her, asking all the questions new parents get asked. But then her expression turned more serious. "I have not told Mom yet," she said. "I do not know if I am going to tell her. I do not know if I want her in my child's life, not after what she did. I do not trust her not to try to control me through my baby, not to use my child as a way to manipulate me." Daniel nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. "That is your choice to make," he said. "And whatever you decide, I will support you." We sat on the porch, the three of us, drinking lemonade and talking about the future. Rebecca asked if we had thought about having children, and Daniel and I looked at each other. We had talked about it, carefully, both of us aware that having a child would mean deciding what role, if any, Patricia would play in that child's life. It was a complicated question, one we had not fully answered yet. But sitting there in the sunshine, listening to Rebecca talk about nursery colors and baby names, I felt a flutter of hope. Maybe we could do this. Maybe we could build a family of our own, one based on love and honesty instead of control and manipulation. That night, after Rebecca had left to drive back to the airport, Daniel and I lay in bed talking in the darkness. The window was open, letting in the cool night air and the sound of crickets chirping. "Do you think we will ever really get past this?" I asked. "Or will it always be there, this shadow over everything?" Daniel was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I think it will always be part of our story," he said finally. "But it does not have to define us. We get to decide what defines us. And I choose to let our strength define us, the fact that we survived this together. I choose to let our love define us, because it was strong enough to withstand everything she threw at it." I rolled over to face him, even though I could barely see him in the darkness. I could feel his warmth, could hear his breathing, steady and calm. "I love you," I said. "I know," he replied, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "I love you too." We fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and for the first time in 2 years, I did not have nightmares. The years that followed were not perfect. We still had hard days, days when the memories would surface and bring back the fear and anger. We still had moments of tension, when Daniel would get a letter from his mother and have to decide whether to open it or throw it away. We still had to navigate the complicated dynamics of living in a small town where some people remembered what had happened and others had moved on or never knew in the first place. But we also had good days, more and more of them as time went on. We had quiet mornings drinking coffee on the porch, watching the sun come up over the trees. We had dinners with friends, real friends who knew our story and loved us anyway. We had Rebecca's visits, and eventually the joy of meeting her daughter, a beautiful baby girl with her mother's eyes and her uncle's smile. We had the satisfaction of building a life together, brick by brick, day by day, a life that was ours and no one else's. 3 years after Patricia left town, Daniel finally opened one of her letters. I do not know what made him ready that particular day. Maybe it was seeing Rebecca with her daughter, seeing the kind of mother Rebecca was, gentle and supportive and nothing like Patricia. Maybe it was just time, enough distance from the pain that he could look at it without being consumed by it. He opened the letter at the kitchen table, the same table where we had sat when Rebecca first told us the truth. I sat across from him, ready to offer support if he needed it. This letter was different from the others. Patricia's handwriting was shakier, less controlled. She wrote that she had been in therapy, that her therapist had helped her see patterns in her behavior that she had never recognized before. She wrote that she was beginning to understand that what she had done was not about protecting Daniel but about controlling him, about her own fear of being alone and unloved. She wrote that she was sorry, truly sorry, not for being overprotective but for lying, for manipulating, for trying to destroy his marriage because she could not handle him loving someone else. She wrote that she did not expect forgiveness, that she knew she might have lost him forever, but she wanted him to know that she was working on herself, trying to become a better person, even if it was too late to repair what she had broken. Daniel read the letter twice, his eyes moving slowly over the words. Then he folded it carefully and set it on the table. "What do you think?" I asked. He looked at me, his expression thoughtful. "I think she might actually mean it this time," he said. "I think she might actually be starting to understand. But I also think it is going to take more than one letter. If she is really changing, really doing the work, then she will keep doing it whether I respond or not. And maybe, eventually, I will be ready to talk to her. But not yet." I nodded, understanding. That seemed fair, seemed healthy. Forgiveness, if it came at all, would have to be earned over time, not granted because of one letter, no matter how sincere it seemed. More letters came, each one showing a deeper understanding of what Patricia had done and why. She wrote about her own childhood, about a mother who had been cold and distant, about learning that love meant control because that was the only kind of love she had ever known. She wrote about her fear when Daniel got married, the terror that she would lose him completely, that she would end up alone like her own mother had. She wrote about the lies she had told herself, that she was protecting him, that she knew better than he did what was good for him, that I was somehow a threat that needed to be eliminated. She wrote about the shame she felt now, looking back at what she had done, at the pain she had caused to people who had never done anything to hurt her. Daniel read each letter, and slowly, carefully, he began to respond. Short letters at first, just a few lines acknowledging that he had received her letter, that he appreciated her honesty. Then longer ones, asking questions, sharing his own feelings, talking about the damage she had done and how hard it had been to rebuild. They were not easy letters to write or to read. There were setbacks, times when Patricia would slip back into old patterns of making excuses or playing the victim, and Daniel would have to call her out on it, would have to remind her that real change meant taking responsibility without qualifications. I watched this process from a distance, supportive but not directly involved. These were Daniel's wounds to heal, his relationship to repair or not repair as he saw fit. Patricia wrote to me too, letters full of apologies and explanations. I read them, but I did not respond. I was not ready, and I did not know if I ever would be. What she had done to me was not something I could easily forgive. She had tried to destroy my reputation, had made me feel unsafe in my own town, had caused me months of fear and isolation. Even if she was genuinely sorry, even if she was genuinely changing, that did not erase what she had done or the scars it had left. For years after everything started, Rebecca's daughter was turning 2, and Rebecca decided to have a birthday party. She asked Daniel if he thought we should invite Patricia. It would be the first time we had all been in the same place since she had left town. Daniel talked to me about it first, asking how I felt. I told him the truth, that I was not comfortable with it, that I was not ready to see her face to face. He nodded and told Rebecca no, not this time. Maybe someday, but not yet. Rebecca understood. She had her own complicated feelings about their mother, her own journey of deciding how much contact she wanted, what kind of relationship, if any, she could have with someone who had hurt her so deeply. She decided to visit Patricia separately, to let her grandmother meet her granddaughter in a controlled setting where Rebecca could leave if things got uncomfortable. She sent us pictures afterward, Patricia holding the little girl, tears streaming down her face. She looks old, Rebecca told us on the phone. Older than she should. I think the guilt is eating at her. Part of me feels bad for her. But then I remember what she did, and I do not feel so bad anymore. I understood that feeling, the complicated mix of pity and anger, the desire to forgive warring with the need to protect yourself from further harm. Forgiveness is not simple, not clean. It is messy and complicated and different for everyone. Some people can forgive easily, can let go of hurt and move on. Others carry it with them, a weight they can never fully set down. I was somewhere in the middle, trying to find a path between bitterness and absolution, trying to figure out what healing looked like for me. Daniel and I did eventually have a child, a son we named after Daniel's father, who had died when Daniel was young. Patricia sent a gift when he was born, a beautiful handmade quilt with a note saying she understood if we did not want her in his life, but she wanted him to have something from her anyway. The quilt was exquisite, every stitch perfect, clearly made with love and care. I ran my fingers over the soft fabric, feeling the hours of work that had gone into it, and I cried. Not because I had forgiven her, but because it was all so sad, so unnecessarily tragic. She could have been a grandmother to this child, could have been part of our lives, if only she had been able to love without controlling, to let go without destroying. We kept the quilt. It seemed wrong to throw it away, to reject this offering that had clearly meant so much to make. But we put it in a closet, not ready to use it, not ready to have that constant reminder of Patricia in our son's nursery. Maybe someday we would take it out, would wrap our son in the warmth of his grandmother's handiwork. But not yet. Not while the wounds were still so fresh, still so tender to the touch. Our son grew, and with him, our family grew stronger. We had built something good, something solid, something that was ours. We had friends who loved us, a community that had mostly accepted us back, work that fulfilled us, and each other. The shadow of what Patricia had done was still there, would always be there in some form, but it no longer dominated our lives. We had learned to live with it, to acknowledge it without letting it control us. Daniel's relationship with his mother continued to evolve slowly. They talked on the phone occasionally, stilted conversations at first, then gradually more natural. She asked about her grandson, and Daniel would tell her small things, what new words he was learning, what foods he liked, how he laughed when Daniel tickled him. Patricia would listen and thank him for sharing, never pushing for more than he was willing to give. It was a fragile connection, easily broken, but it was something. 5 years after Patricia had left town, she asked if she could visit. Not to stay with us, she was quick to clarify. She would get a hotel room. She just wanted to see Daniel, to meet her grandson, even if just for an hour. Daniel asked me what I thought. I took a long time to answer, really thinking about it, examining my feelings. I am not ready to see her, I said finally. But I will not stop you from seeing her if that is what you want. And if you want to take our son to meet her, I trust your judgment. I trust you to keep him safe, to not let her manipulate him the way she manipulated you. Daniel looked at me with such gratitude, such love, that I knew I had said the right thing. This was his mother, his choice to make. I could set my own boundaries without controlling his. Patricia came to town on a Saturday in June. The weather was perfect, sunny and warm with a light breeze that carried the scent of honeysuckle and fresh-cut grass. Daniel took our son to meet her at a park, neutral territory where they could talk and play and leave easily if needed. I stayed home, painting in my studio, trying not to watch the clock, trying not to imagine how it was going. They were gone for 2 hours. When they came back, our son was chattering about the ducks he had seen, about the ice cream the nice lady had bought him. Daniel looked exhausted but not upset. It went okay, he told me later, after our son was in bed. She was good with him. Gentle. She did not try to overstep or make promises she could not keep. She just played with him and told him she was his grandma and that she loved him. And then she thanked me for letting her meet him and said she hoped maybe she could see him again sometime. I nodded, feeling a complicated mix of emotions I could not quite name. I was glad it had gone well, glad that Daniel had been able to have that time with his mother, glad that our son had met his grandmother in a positive way. But I was also wary, still protective, still remembering the woman who had tried to destroy me. People can change, I knew that. But they can also slip back into old patterns, especially under stress. Only time would tell which version of Patricia was real, the manipulative woman who had spread lies about me or the remorseful grandmother who had played gently with her grandson in the park. Patricia visited twice more that year, always with advance notice, always respecting the boundaries we set. She never asked to come to our house, never pushed to see me, seemed to understand that her relationship with Daniel and her grandson was separate from any relationship she might or might not ever have with me. Daniel said she was different, calmer, less controlling. She asked questions instead of making demands, listened instead of lecturing. He was cautiously optimistic that the change was real, that the therapy had actually helped her become a better person. I remained skeptical, but I kept my skepticism to myself. This was Daniel's journey, and he needed to walk it in his own way, at his own pace. If Patricia had truly changed, if she could maintain these healthier patterns, then maybe someday I could find a way to forgive her, or at least to coexist peacefully with her. But I was in no hurry. Forgiveness, I had learned, could not be rushed. It came in its own time, or it did not come at all, and either way was okay. 6 years after the rumors started, I finally agreed to see Patricia. Not because I had forgiven her, but because I was tired of carrying the weight of my anger, tired of letting her actions continue to control my life even from a distance. We met at a coffee shop in the next town over, not Brenda's Brew, never Brenda's Brew, but a quiet place with soft music and comfortable chairs. Daniel came with me, sitting beside me, his hand in mine, a silent show of support. Patricia looked older than I remembered, her hair more gray than silver now, lines around her eyes and mouth that had not been there before. She stood when we came in, her hands twisting nervously, and I could see that she was genuinely afraid, genuinely uncertain. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I know I do not deserve it." We sat down, the three of us around a small table, and for a moment no one spoke. The silence was heavy, full of everything that had happened, everything that had been said and done and could not be taken back. "I am sorry," Patricia said finally, looking directly at me. "I am so sorry for what I did to you. There is no excuse for it. I was cruel and manipulative, and I tried to destroy your life because I was afraid of losing my son. I told myself I was protecting him, but I was really just trying to control him, to keep him dependent on me. And when that did not work, when he chose you over me, I lashed out in the worst way I could think of. I wanted to hurt you, to drive you away, and I did not care who else got hurt in the process. What I did was unforgivable, and I am not asking you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did, and I am sorry, and I am trying every day to be a better person than the person who did that to you. I listened to her words, watching her face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. But all I saw was genuine remorse, genuine shame. She was not making excuses, not trying to minimize what she had done. She was taking full responsibility, and that was something I had never expected to hear from her. I do not know if I can forgive you, I said, my voice steady despite the emotions churning inside me. What you did caused me months of pain and fear. You made me feel unsafe in my own town, made me doubt myself and my marriage. You tried to destroy everything I had built, and even though you did not succeed, the scars are still there. I do not know if those scars will ever fully heal. Patricia nodded, tears running down her cheeks. I understand, she said. I do not expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I am sorry, and that I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends, even if those amends can never be enough. We talked for another hour, a difficult conversation full of painful truths and hard questions. But it was also, in its own way, healing. Not because it fixed everything, but because it brought things into the open, allowed us to say things that needed to be said. When we left the coffee shop, I felt lighter somehow, as if I had set down a burden I had been carrying for too long. I still did not forgive Patricia, still did not trust her, but I had said what I needed to say, and she had heard me. That was something. That was a start, even if I did not know where it would lead. Over the next few years, Patricia remained a peripheral presence in our lives. She visited a few times a year, always respectful of boundaries, always careful not to overstep. She sent birthday cards and Christmas presents, thoughtful gifts that showed she was paying attention to what our son liked, what interested him. She never tried to undermine us as parents, never tried to turn our son against us or make him keep secrets. She seemed to genuinely be trying to be a good grandmother within the limits we had set. Daniel's relationship with her grew stronger, though it would never be what it had been before. There was always a wariness there, a part of him that could not fully trust her, that remembered what she was capable of when she felt threatened or out of control. But there was also love, complicated and conditional, but real. She was his mother, and despite everything, he wanted to have some kind of relationship with her. I understood that, even if I could not fully share it. As for me, I never became close to Patricia. We were polite to each other, civil, but there was always a distance between us, a wall I could not bring myself to tear down. Maybe that made me unforgiving, maybe it made me cold, but it was what I needed to protect myself. I had learned the hard way that not everyone deserves unlimited chances, that sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is maintain boundaries with people who have hurt you, even if they are sorry, even if they have changed. Our son grew up knowing his grandmother, but also knowing that the relationship was complicated, that there was history there that he would understand better when he was older. We did not hide what had happened from him, but we also did not burden him with details he was too young to process. We told him that sometimes people make mistakes, big mistakes, and that it takes a long time to rebuild trust after that. We told him that it was okay to love someone and still have boundaries with them, that forgiveness was a choice, not an obligation. The town moved on, as towns do. New people moved in who did not know our story. Old people moved away or passed on, taking their memories of the scandal with them. Brenda's brew changed ownership, the new owner renovating and updating, erasing the physical space where so much of the damage had been done. Main Street got new shops, new restaurants, a new energy. The place that had felt like a prison during those dark months became just a town again, familiar and comfortable, full of people who knew us as Daniel and his wife, not as the couple at the center of that old drama. I continued to paint, my work evolving as I processed everything that had happened. I started showing my pieces in local galleries, then in galleries in bigger cities. People responded to the emotion in my work, the raw honesty of it. I never told them that the swirls of red and black were about anger and fear, that the soft blues and golds were about healing and hope, that every painting was a chapter in the story of surviving betrayal and coming out the other side. But maybe they could feel it anyway, could sense the journey embedded in the colors and shapes. Daniel thrived at the hardware store, eventually buying it from the previous owner and becoming his own boss. He loved the work, loved helping people fix their homes and build their projects, loved being part of the community in a positive way. He joined the town council, working to make the town better, to create the kind of community where people looked out for each other instead of tearing each other down. It was his way of taking something good from something bad, of using his experience to make sure others did not have to go through what we had gone through. Rebecca's daughter grew, and Rebecca had another child, a son this time. She and Daniel talked on the phone every week, their bond stronger than ever. They had both survived their mother's attempts to control them, had both built lives that were healthy and happy despite the dysfunction they had grown up with. They were proof that you could break the cycle, that you did not have to repeat the patterns of your parents, that you could choose to be different, to be better. 10 years after the rumors started, I was standing in my kitchen again, flour on my hands, the smell of vanilla in the air. I was making chocolate chip cookies, the same recipe I had been making that morning when Patricia had been across town planting the seeds of lies that would nearly destroy my life. But this time, everything was different. My son was at the table doing homework, his tongue sticking out slightly in concentration the way Daniel's did when he was focused. Daniel was due home any minute, and I knew he would walk in and kiss me and steal a cookie before they were cool enough to eat. The house smelled like home, felt like safety, was full of the life we had built together. I thought about Patricia sometimes, wondered if she ever thought about that morning 10 years ago, if she ever wished she could go back and make a different choice. She was older now, her health not what it used to be. Daniel visited her in Florida once a year, sometimes taking our son, sometimes going alone. He said she seemed content, or as content as someone living with the weight of their past mistakes could be. She had friends there, a small life, a therapist she still saw regularly. She had not tried to control or manipulate in years, as far as we knew. Maybe she really had changed. Maybe people could change, even people who had done terrible things. But I also knew that change did not erase the past. Patricia could spend the rest of her life being a better person, and it would not undo the months of fear and isolation she had put me through. It would not erase the damage to my reputation, the friendships that had been lost, the trust that had been broken. Some things, once broken, could never be fully repaired. They could be patched, could be worked around, could be accepted as part of your story, but they would always be there, a crack in the foundation that you learned to live with. The timer went off, pulling me back to the present. I took the cookies out of the oven, the smell of chocolate and butter filling the kitchen. My son looked up from his homework and grinned. "Can I have one?" he asked. "Not yet," I said, smiling back at him. "They are too hot. You will burn your mouth." He groaned dramatically, making me laugh. Just like his father, impatient and sweet-toothed and full of life. I heard the front door open, heard Daniel's footsteps in the hallway. "Hey," he called out, "I am home." My son jumped up and ran to greet him, and I heard them laughing together, heard the sound of a hug and Daniel asking about homework and my son complaining about math. Normal sounds, everyday sounds, the sounds of a family that had survived and was thriving. Daniel came into the kitchen, our son hanging off his arm, and he smiled at me with so much love that it made my chest ache in the best way. "Something smells amazing," he said, eyeing the cookies. I pointed the spatula at him. "Do not even think about it," I said. "They need to cool." He laughed and came over anyway, wrapping his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "Thank you," he said quietly, so only I could hear. "For what?" I asked, though I thought I knew. "For everything," he said. "For staying. For fighting. For building this life with me. For being strong enough for both of us when I was not strong enough myself." I turned in his arms and kissed him, tasting coffee and the mint gum he always chewed after lunch. "I love you," I said. "I know," he replied, echoing the words from so many years ago, and we both smiled at the memory. Our son made a gagging noise. "Gross," he said. "You guys are always kissing." We laughed and broke apart, and Daniel ruffled our son's hair. "Someday you will understand," he said. "Someday you will meet someone who makes you want to kiss them all the time." Our son made a face. "Never," he declared with the certainty of a child who could not yet imagine such things. "We will see," I said, amused. We sat down to dinner together, the three of us around the table, talking about our days, making plans for the weekend, arguing good-naturedly about what movie to watch later. It was ordinary and perfect, the kind of moment you do not appreciate until you have almost lost it. I looked at my family, at the life we had built from the ashes of what Patricia had tried to destroy, and I felt grateful. Not grateful for what had happened, never that, but grateful that we had survived it, that we had come through it together, that we were here, now, whole and happy and home. The story of what Patricia did became part of our family history, a story we would tell our son when he was old enough to understand, a cautionary tale about the damage that control and manipulation could do, but also a story about resilience and love and the strength it takes to rebuild after betrayal. It was not a story with a neat ending, not a story where everyone forgave and forgot and lived happily ever after. Real life was messier than that, more complicated, full of gray areas and unresolved feelings and relationships that existed in a state of permanent tension. But it was our story, and we had survived it, and that was enough. We had learned things about ourselves and each other that we might never have learned otherwise. We had learned that love was not just about the good times, the easy moments, but about standing together when everything was falling apart. We had learned that trust, once broken, could be rebuilt, slowly and carefully, brick by brick. We had learned that forgiveness was not always necessary for healing, that sometimes the healthiest thing you could do was accept what had happened and move forward without absolving the person who had hurt you. I thought about all the people in town who had believed Patricia's lies, who had turned their backs on me without asking questions, without giving me a chance to defend myself. Some of them had apologized and become friends. Others had never acknowledged their role in what happened, had simply moved on as if it had never occurred. I had learned to live with both outcomes, to accept that not everyone would take responsibility for their actions, that sometimes you had to find peace without getting the closure you wanted. Mrs. Henderson remained one of our closest friends, her guilt over believing the rumors transforming into a fierce loyalty. She was the first person to defend us if anyone brought up the old story, the first to shut down gossip before it could spread. She had learned her lesson, she said, about the danger of believing rumors without evidence, about the importance of going directly to the source instead of participating in whisper campaigns. She had become an advocate for kindness and direct communication, using her own mistake as a teaching moment for others. Janet from the post office had also become a good friend, her natural chattiness now directed toward positive gossip, sharing good news and celebrations instead of scandals and rumors. She said the whole experience had made her examine her own behavior, made her realize how much harm could be done by passing along information without verifying it first. She had started a kindness initiative in town, encouraging people to assume the best about their neighbors instead of the worst, to ask questions instead of making assumptions. It was a small thing, but it made a difference, slowly changing the culture of the town from one of judgment to one of support. The town itself had changed in subtle ways. People were more careful about gossip now, more aware of the damage it could do. The story of what had happened to us had become a cautionary tale, a reminder that rumors could destroy lives, that mob mentality was dangerous, that everyone deserved the benefit of the doubt. It was not a perfect change. People were still people, still prone to gossip and judgment, but there was more awareness, more hesitation before believing the worst about someone. I had changed too, in ways both good and bad. I was more cautious now, slower to trust, quicker to protect myself. I had learned that the world was not always fair, that bad things could happen to good people for no reason at all, that sometimes the people who were supposed to love you could hurt you the most. But I had also learned that I was stronger than I thought, that I could survive things I never imagined surviving, that I could rebuild after devastation. I had learned the value of true friendship, the importance of standing up for yourself, the power of refusing to let someone else's actions define you. Daniel had changed too. He was more aware now of the patterns of manipulation, more willing to set boundaries, more protective of our family. He had learned that love without boundaries was not healthy, that sometimes the most loving thing you could do was say no, that you could care about someone and still refuse to let them hurt you or the people you loved. He had learned that his mother's love had been conditional and controlling, and he had chosen to love differently, to love our son with freedom and trust, to let him grow into his own person instead of trying to mold him into what we wanted him to be. Our son was growing up in a different environment than Daniel had, surrounded by healthy relationships and open communication. We made sure he knew he could talk to us about anything, that we would listen without judgment, that our love was not conditional on him being perfect or meeting our expectations. We made sure he understood that family was important but that it did not give anyone the right to hurt you, that sometimes the healthiest thing you could do was distance yourself from toxic people, even if they were related to you. He asked questions sometimes about why he did not see his grandmother very often, why she lived so far away, why there was a tension in the air when her name came up. We answered honestly, in age-appropriate ways, telling him that his grandmother had made some mistakes that had hurt people, that she was working on being better, but that trust took time to rebuild. He seemed to accept this, to understand in his own way that relationships were complicated, that adults did not always get along, that love could exist alongside hurt and caution. As the years passed, the sharp edges of the pain dulled. It never went away completely, but it became something I could live with, something that was part of my story but did not dominate it. I could think about those dark months without feeling the same visceral fear and anger. I could see Patricia's name on a birthday card without my stomach clenching. I could hear Daniel talk about visiting her without feeling betrayed or abandoned. It was progress, slow and hard-won, but real. I never did fully forgive Patricia. I came to accept what had happened, to understand her motivations even if I could not excuse her actions, to feel a distant sort of pity for the woman who had been so afraid of losing her son that she had nearly lost him permanently. But forgiveness, the kind that wipes the slate clean and restores the relationship to what it was before, that never came. And I made peace with that. Forgiveness was not a requirement for healing. I could heal, could move forward, could build a good life, without ever forgiving the person who had tried to destroy me. Daniel understood this, never pushed me to forgive his mother, never made me feel guilty for maintaining my boundaries. He had his own relationship with her, separate from mine, and that was okay. We had learned that we could support each other without having to feel the same way about everything, that we could respect each other's choices even when they were different from our own. It was a mature kind of love, tested and strengthened by fire, more resilient than the easy love of our early years. 15 years after the rumors started, Patricia's health began to fail. She had a heart condition, Daniel told me, serious but manageable with medication and lifestyle changes. She was scared, he said, afraid of dying alone, afraid of leaving things unresolved. She had asked if she could come visit one more time, if she could see our son, if she could talk to me. Daniel left the decision up to me, said he would support whatever I chose. I thought about it for a long time, weighing my need for self-protection against the reality that Patricia was getting older, that time was running out for any kind of resolution. In the end, I agreed to see her, not because I had forgiven her, but because I did not want to carry the weight of refusing a dying woman's request. I did not want to look back years from now and wonder if I should have been more generous, more compassionate, more willing to let go of my anger. She came in the spring, when the world was green and new, when flowers were blooming and birds were singing and everything felt full of possibility. She looked frail, her skin papery thin, her movements slow and careful. But her eyes were still sharp, still intelligent, and when she looked at me, I saw genuine remorse, genuine regret for what she had done. We sat in the living room, Daniel beside me, our son playing in the next room, and we talked. Patricia thanked me for agreeing to see her, said she knew she did not deserve my time or my attention. She said she had spent the last 15 years thinking about what she had done, working with her therapist to understand why she had been so threatened by my relationship with Daniel, why she had felt the need to destroy rather than accept. She said she understood now that it had been about her own fears and insecurities, her own inability to let go, her own toxic patterns learned from her own mother and never examined until it was too late. She said she was sorry, not just for what she had done, but for the person she had been, for the mother she had been to Daniel and Rebecca, for all the ways she had tried to control and manipulate instead of love and support. She said she did not expect forgiveness, but she wanted me to know that she had changed, that she had spent years becoming a better person, and that she hoped that counted for something, even if it could not undo the past. I listened to her words, and I believed her. I believed that she was sorry, that she had changed, that she had done the work to become a better person. But I also knew that it did not change what she had done, did not erase the months of fear and pain, did not restore what had been lost. I am glad you have changed, I told her. I am glad you have done the work to understand yourself and become a better person. But I cannot forgive you. What you did caused too much damage, hurt too many people. I have made peace with it, I have moved on, but I cannot forgive it. I hope you can understand that. Patricia nodded, tears running down her withered cheeks. I understand, she said. I do not blame you. I just wanted you to know that I am sorry, and that I will carry the weight of what I did for the rest of my life. We talked a little longer, about lighter things, about our son and his interests, about Daniel's work, about the town and how it had changed. It was not comfortable, but it was civil, respectful, a closing of a chapter that had been left open for too long. When she left, I felt a sense of finality, of completion. I had said what I needed to say, had heard what she needed to tell me, and now it was done. I did not need to see her again, did not need to maintain a relationship with her, but I also did not need to carry the anger anymore. I could let it go, not because I forgave her, but because I was tired of carrying it, tired of letting it take up space in my heart and mind. Patricia died 2 years later, her heart finally giving out despite the medications and the careful monitoring. Daniel was with her at the end, holding her hand as she slipped away. He came home quiet and sad, grieving for the mother she could have been, for the relationship they could have had if she had been healthier, if she had been able to love without controlling. I held him while he cried, offering comfort without words, understanding that this grief was complicated, layered with relief and regret and love and anger all mixed together. We went to the funeral in Florida, just Daniel and me, leaving our son with Rebecca. It was a small service, attended by a handful of people from Patricia's life in Florida, people who had known the changed version of her, the woman who had worked so hard to be better. They spoke about her kindness, her generosity, her willingness to listen and help. They spoke about a woman I barely recognized, and I realized that Patricia had managed to build a new life for herself, a life where she was not defined by her worst actions, where she could be the person she had always wanted to be. It made me sad, in a way, to think that she had been capable of being that person all along, that if she had done the work earlier, if she had been willing to examine her patterns and change them, so much pain could have been avoided. But it also gave me hope that people really could change, that it was never too late to become better, that redemption was possible even after terrible mistakes. After the funeral, Daniel and I walked on the beach, the sand warm under our feet, the ocean stretching out endlessly before us. The air smelled like salt and seaweed, and gulls cried overhead, their voices sharp and lonely. We did not talk much, just walked hand in hand, letting the rhythm of the waves wash over us. I thought about everything that had happened, the long journey from that morning in my kitchen when I had been making cookies, unaware that my life was about to be turned upside down, to this moment, standing on a beach in Florida, mourning a woman who had tried to destroy me but had ultimately failed. I thought about resilience, about the human capacity to survive and adapt and grow. I thought about love, the complicated, messy reality of it, how it could coexist with hurt and anger and disappointment. I thought about forgiveness, how it was not always necessary, how healing could happen without it, how you could move forward and build a good life even with unresolved pain in your past. I thought about family, how it was not always the people you were born to but the people you chose, the people who stood by you when everything fell apart. Daniel squeezed my hand, pulling me back to the present. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything," I said. "Nothing. Just how far we have come." He nodded, understanding without needing more explanation. "We have come far," he agreed. "And we did it together. That is what matters." We stood there for a while longer, watching the sun sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. It was beautiful, achingly so, and I felt grateful to be there, to be alive, to have survived everything that had tried to break me. We flew home the next day, back to our town, our house, our son, our life. Everything looked the same, but I felt different, lighter somehow, as if Patricia's death had released me from something I had not even realized I was still carrying. The story was over now, truly over, not just paused or on hold but finished. Patricia was gone, and with her went the last possibility of further harm, the last shadow of threat. I could finally, fully, let it go. Our son was waiting for us when we got home, running out to meet us, full of stories about his time with Rebecca and her kids. He hugged us tight, and I breathed in the smell of him, shampoo and grass and something uniquely his own. This was what mattered, I thought. This moment, this child, this family we had built and protected and nurtured through everything. This was what Patricia had tried to destroy and failed. This was our victory, our triumph, our proof that love was stronger than hate, that truth was stronger than lies, that we were stronger than anyone who tried to break us. Life went on, as it always does. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, months into years. Our son grew up, went to college, started his own life. Daniel and I grew older together, our hair graying, our bodies slowing down, but our love as strong as ever, maybe stronger, tempered by everything we had been through. We had grandchildren eventually, Rebecca's kids and then our son's kids, and we loved them fiercely, protectively, making sure they grew up knowing they were safe, that they were valued, that they could trust the adults in their lives. We told them the story eventually, when they were old enough to understand, about their great-grandmother who had made terrible mistakes but had tried to make amends, about the town that had turned against us but had eventually come back, about the importance of standing up for yourself and the people you love, about the power of resilience and the complexity of forgiveness. We told them so they would understand their family history, so they would learn from our experiences, so they would know that they came from people who had survived hard things and come out stronger. The town continued to change and evolve, new generations growing up with no memory of the scandal that had once consumed it. Brenda's brew was torn down eventually, replaced by a modern coffee shop with sleek lines and expensive espresso machines. Main Street was revitalized, attracting tourists and new businesses. The old-timers who remembered what had happened grew fewer and fewer, until one day I realized that almost no one left in town knew the story, that it had faded into history, a footnote in the town's collective memory. I continued to paint, my work evolving as I aged, becoming softer, more hopeful, less about pain and more about beauty, about the small moments of grace that made life worth living. I had gallery shows in cities across the country, my work resonating with people who saw in it something of their own struggles and triumphs. I never told them the story behind the paintings, never explained what had inspired them, but I think they understood anyway, in the way that art speaks to the soul without needing words. Daniel retired from the hardware store, selling it to a young couple who reminded us of ourselves when we were starting out, full of hope and energy and dreams. He spent his retirement working in the garden, building things in his workshop, volunteering at the community center, being a grandfather to our growing collection of grandchildren. He was happy, content, at peace with his life and his choices. He rarely talked about his mother anymore, the wound having healed into a scar that he carried but did not dwell on. Rebecca remained close to us, visiting often, her children and grandchildren becoming as much a part of our family as our own. She and Daniel had a bond that nothing could break, forged in the fire of surviving their mother's manipulation and choosing to be different, to be better. They talked about Patricia sometimes, remembering the good moments along with the bad, trying to hold the complexity of who she had been, neither demonizing her nor excusing her, just accepting that she had been human, flawed and capable of both great harm and genuine change. I thought about Patricia less and less as the years went on, until whole months would pass without her crossing my mind. When I did think of her, it was with a distant sort of sadness, a recognition of wasted potential, of a life that could have been so different if she had been willing to face her demons earlier. but I did not dwell on it. I had my own life to live, my own joys to celebrate, my own challenges to face. Patricia was part of my past, but she was not my present, and she would not be my future. On a warm summer evening, many years after everything had happened, I was sitting on the porch with Daniel, watching the sun set over the trees. The air was thick with the smell of honeysuckle and freshly cut grass, and fireflies were beginning to emerge, their lights blinking on and off in the gathering dusk. Our grandchildren were playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the breeze, and I felt a deep sense of contentment, of gratitude for this life we had built. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Daniel asked, his voice quiet and thoughtful. "If my mother had not done what she did. If we had not gone through all of that." I considered the question, really thought about it. "Yes," I said. "Sometimes I think about it. But I do not know if different would have been better. What we went through was terrible, but it also made us stronger. It taught us things we might never have learned otherwise. It showed us who we really were, what we were capable of surviving. So yes, it could have been different. But I do not know if I would change it, even if I could." Daniel nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I feel the same way," he said. "I hate what she did. I hate what we went through. But I love who we became because of it. I love the life we built. I love that we did not let it destroy us." He reached over and took my hand, his fingers warm and familiar, and we sat there in comfortable silence, watching the day fade into night, listening to our grandchildren play, feeling the weight of our shared history and the lightness of our shared future. The story of what Patricia did, of how she tried to turn the town against me, of how we survived and rebuilt and thrived, became a story we told to illustrate a point, to teach a lesson, to explain why we were the way we were. It was no longer a fresh wound but an old scar, visible but not painful, a reminder of what we had been through but not a definition of who we were. We were more than that story, bigger than that trauma, defined by our choices and our love and our resilience rather than by what had been done to us. And in the end, that was the real victory. Not that we had forgiven Patricia, not that the town had apologized, not that justice had been served in any formal sense. The real victory was that we had refused to let what happened define us, and refused to let it make us bitter or broken or afraid. We had taken the worst thing that had ever happened to us and we had survived it, and then we had built something beautiful on the other side of it. We had loved each other through the darkness and come out into the light together. We had created a family, a home, a life that was full of joy and meaning and purpose. That was what mattered. That was what would last long after the details of the scandal had faded from memory, long after everyone who remembered it was gone. The love would remain, passed down through generations, a legacy of strength and resilience and a refusal to give up even when everything seemed hopeless. That was our story, the real story, the one that mattered. Not the story of what Patricia did to us, but the story of what we did in response, how we chose to survive and thrive and love despite everything. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, one by one, like tiny promises of light in the darkness, I thought about all the people who had been part of our journey. Mrs. Henderson, who had learned from her mistake and become a fierce friend. Janet, who had turned her love of gossip into a force for good. Rebecca, who had found the courage to speak the truth even when it was hard. Our son, who had grown up knowing he was loved unconditionally. Our grandchildren, who would carry our story forward into a future we would never see. I thought about the town, how it had changed and grown, how it had learned, however imperfectly, to be more careful with its judgments, more thoughtful about its gossip. I thought about all the small acts of kindness that had helped us heal, the casseroles left on our doorstep, the cards in the mail, the smiles from strangers who wanted us to know they believed us, they supported us, they were sorry for what we had been through. And I thought about Patricia, about the woman she had been and the woman she had become, about the damage she had done and the amends she had tried to make. I thought about how she had died alone in Florida, far from the town where she had once held so much power, far from the son she had tried so hard to control. I thought about whether she had found peace at the end, whether she had been able to forgive herself even if I could not forgive her. I hoped she had. I hoped that in her final moments, she had been able to let go of the guilt and the regret and the fear, had been able to rest in the knowledge that she had tried, at least, to be better. The fireflies danced in the yard, their lights creating patterns in the darkness, and our grandchildren chased them with jars, their voices high with excitement. Daniel squeezed my hand, and I squeezed back, a silent conversation that needed no words. We had made it. We had survived. We were here, together, surrounded by love and light and the promise of tomorrow. That was enough. That was everything. The night deepened, and eventually our grandchildren were called inside by their parents, their protests fading as they were promised stories and snacks and the comfort of bedtime routines. The yard grew quiet, the only sounds the chirping of crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl in the distance. Daniel and I stayed on the porch, reluctant to go inside, wanting to hold onto this moment a little longer, this perfect evening that felt like a gift, like a reward for everything we had endured. I leaned my head on Daniel's shoulder, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing, the warmth of his body against mine. We had grown old together, our bodies showing the wear of years, but our connection was as strong as ever, maybe stronger. We knew each other in ways that went beyond words, could communicate with a look or a touch, could sense each other's moods and needs without having to ask. That kind of intimacy was earned, built over years of showing up for each other, of choosing each other again and again, especially when it would have been easier to walk away. "Thank you," I said softly, not sure exactly what I was thanking him for, but feeling the need to say it anyway. "Thank you for everything. For believing me. For standing by me. For building this life with me." Daniel turned his head and kissed my temple, his lips warm and gentle. "Thank you," he said back. "For staying. For fighting. For loving me even when I did not deserve it. For being the strongest person I know." We sat there in the darkness, holding each other, two people who had been through hell and come out the other side, scarred but whole, damaged but not broken, forever changed but still standing. The story of what happened, of how my mother-in-law turned the town against me, was a story with many chapters, some dark and painful, others hopeful and healing. It was a story about betrayal and resilience, about the damage that lies could do and the power of truth to eventually prevail. It was a story about the complexity of family, the importance of boundaries, the necessity of standing up for yourself even when the whole world seems to be against you. It was a story about love, the kind that survives fire and comes out stronger, the kind that chooses to stay even when leaving would be easier, the kind that builds and rebuilds and never gives up. But more than anything, it was a story about survival, about the human capacity to endure unimaginable pain and still find reasons to hope, to laugh, to love. It was a story about refusing to let the worst thing that ever happened to you become the only thing that defined you. It was a story about taking the broken pieces of your life and putting them back together in a new pattern, one that was different from what you had planned but beautiful in its own way. As I sat there on the porch with Daniel, surrounded by the sounds and smells of a summer night, I realized that I would not trade this life for anything, not even for a version where Patricia had never tried to destroy me, where we had never gone through that terrible time. Because this life, with all its scars and complications, was ours. We had earned it. We had fought for it. We had built it together, brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day. And it was good. It was more than good. It was everything. The moon rose higher in the sky, full and bright, casting silver light across the yard. The world was quiet and peaceful, and I felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over me, gratitude for this moment, this life, this man beside me, this family we had created. Gratitude for having survived, for having the chance to grow old, to see our children and grandchildren thrive, to know that the story did not end with the darkness but continued on into the light. Nobody imagines what happened, I thought, remembering the title of this story, the summary of those terrible months when my world had turned upside down. Nobody imagines that the person who is supposed to love you most could try to destroy you. Nobody imagines that a whole town could turn against you based on lies. Nobody imagines that you could survive something like that and come out stronger. But we did. We survived. We thrived. We built a life that was worth all the pain it took to get here. And as I sat there in the moonlight, holding the hand of the man I loved, listening to the sounds of the night, feeling the peace that comes from having weathered the storm and found safe harbor, I knew that this was the real ending to the story. Not the confrontation with Patricia, not her death, not even the gradual healing and rebuilding. The real ending was this moment, this quiet contentment, this deep knowing that we had made it, that we were okay, that we were more than okay. We were happy. We were whole. We were home. The story of what Patricia did would always be part of us, woven into the fabric of who we were, but it was not the whole story. The whole story included the love that had sustained us, the friends who had stood by us, the strength we had discovered in ourselves, the life we had built in the aftermath. The whole story was bigger and more beautiful than the darkness that had tried to consume it. And that was the story I chose to focus on, the story I chose to tell, the story I chose to live. Daniel stirred beside me, his voice soft in the darkness. "Ready to go in?" he asked. I nodded, though I was reluctant to leave this perfect moment. But I knew there would be other moments, other perfect evenings, other chances to sit together and remember how far we had come. That was the gift of survival, the gift of choosing to stay and fight and build. You got to have more moments, more chances, more tomorrows. We stood up slowly, our joints creaking in protest, and walked hand in hand into the house. The lights were warm and welcoming, and I could hear the sounds of our family inside, the murmur of conversation, the laughter of children, the ordinary beautiful sounds of life going on. We stepped inside and closed the door behind us, leaving the night and its memories outside, stepping into the warmth and light of the present, of the life we had earned, of the home we had made. And in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that we had won. Not because Patricia had apologized or died or faced any kind of formal justice. We had won because we were still here, still together, still loving each other and building our life. We had won because we had refused to let her destroy us, had refused to let the lies define us, had refused to give up even when everything seemed hopeless. We had won because we had survived, and survival, I had learned, was its own kind of victory.